Do you want to become a god? Do you want to become legendary?
Legendary!
Well, I can't help you with that, but I can help you get better at the game with this build. Today, we're looking at the Season 21 Solar Titan build. Now, I know this season isn't focused on solar, but this build is so strong that I need to talk about it now. Last time we talked about a Solar Titan build, we focused more on survivability. With this build, we're focusing on damage. We're gonna be doing 2-a-days to have your arms looking this juiced.
I'm buff!
That's right, this is the Solar Titan Synthoceps build. Let's jump right on into it. For those who don't know, Synthoceps will buff your melee damage by 200% and super damage by 50% when surrounded by 3 or more enemies. This buff lasts 8 seconds. This is also stacking with Roaring Flames, meaning our hammer will be one-shotting most adds even in high-level content. Because our hammer is so powerful, other things like grenades or weapons that we use become less important. So we have more flexibility to output higher numbers for DPS phases or picking the right weapons according to modifiers. However, I do think this build shines when you have a solar primary with incandescent. The rotation for this build is to kill 3 times with your hammer to stack up Roaring Flames times 3, making our melee super strong. We then pair this with orb creation on melee kills and solar weapon surge to amp up our primary weapon. After our 3 hammer kills, we can either keep running around with our hammer or we can start using our buff weapons to kill and extend the restoration and radiance. And one final note, you can output mad DPS with your super in the right scenario. Alright, let's go. Looking at the super and the abilities, I'm primarily taking Hammer of Soul. Burning Maul can output more damage in a boss phase and has a shorter cooldown, but in most scenarios, I'm choosing a Hammer of Soul for one reason. It's range. It means if you have a boss that's flying up in the air and you can't reach him with the big hammer, start throwing your hammer instead. It's a little bit better in most scenarios, but if you do have the right scenario, Burning Maul can output a ton of damage. For our abilities, I'm picking Tower Barricade. Since we don't have on-demand healing like Lorelei does, I'm choosing Tower purely for protection. It offers us a little bit more coverage to work behind, and it does have a slightly longer cooldown, but it's not a big deal. I'm also choosing Strafe Lift because I like it a little bit better. Throwing Hammer is a crutch for this build. Picking up your hammer refreshes your melee and gives you Cure. Since this build is focused around throwing your hammer as much as possible, it's awesome to be able to replenish our melee on demand. I also like Solar Grenade. I find it to be the most consistent, though if you are doing harder content, Healing Grenade can be better. For our aspects, I'm using Roaring Flames. This makes it so that whenever we kill with our solar abilities, we're getting up to 3 stacks of Roaring Flames, meaning our damage is going to be increased with every single stack. This pairs very well with Synthoceps, since whenever you become surrounded and you're using your hammer becomes very, very strong. This also works very well with the aspect Sol Invictus. Whenever we get an ability kill, it creates a sunspot, and in that sunspot, our abilities charge faster, we're granted restoration, and our super drains more slowly. Not to mention, it also does damage enemies that step into it. So not only do we have a super strong hammer, we're also stacking a buff with Roaring Flames and Synthoceps and creating sunspots at each of the kills locations, meaning if you are surrounded, you're now killing those adds that are trying to attack you. Plus your abilities are charging at a faster rate and you're giving yourself restoration. Win, win, win. For our fragments, the first fragment I'm choosing is Ember of Torches. This means the powered melee will make you and allies radiant. This is just going to buff our weapons a little bit more. It's always good to have. I'm also pairing this with Ember of Solace, meaning our radiance and restoration will have a longer duration, making it a little bit easier to survive and output damage for longer periods. And the third kicker for this build is going to be the Ember of Empyrean. This means whenever a solar weapon or an ability final blow, this will extend our restoration and radiant. This pairs perfectly since we do want to stay close and be surrounded. We can continuously kill with our hammer or our solar weapon to extend the restoration buff that we are getting. Since it does have a longer duration from the Ember of Solace, it makes it a little bit easier to have that few seconds in between to go ahead and get a kill, lengthening your restoration up to 12 seconds. Finally, I like to pair this with Ember of Searing, meaning when we defeat a scorched target, it creates a fire sprite, but more importantly, it also grants melee energy. This is good for getting your hammer back when you lose it. Since we are pairing this with a solar weapon that has incandescent, we're scorching targets on a consistent basis, and we can use our non-powered melee when we have Roaring Flames to scorch targets. Let's take a look at what mods that I think might be helpful for this build. For our head, the first mod I'm going to choose to take is a Harmonic Siphon mod. Since we are using a solar weapon, this means whenever we're getting multiple kills with our solar weapon, weapon, we're going to create orbs. Orbs are always going to be helpful for us and our team. The second mod I'm taking is going to be hands-on. This means melee kills will grant super energy. Since we are throwing our hammer a ton and getting a bunch of kills with it, it means that we can power up our super to have our super back whenever we want it. Our third and final mod, I'm choosing a heavy ammo finder. This means you're going to have an increased drop chance for heavy ammo. This one isn't necessary, but it does make it easier for any activity that does have a boss, or if you are doing even harder content, it's always nice to have more heavy ammo. Moving on to the arms. The first mod I'm taking is heavy-handed, meaning powered melee blows create orbs. Again, we are throwing our hammer as much as possible, and this creates a loop where you can continuously throw your hammer to create orbs, feeding your super and feeding your other abilities. This also works if you do lose your hammer. You can use your normal punch when you do have roaring flames, and it does count as a powered melee. The second mod I'm taking is impact induction. Melee attacks will reduce grenade cooldown, and since we are throwing our hammer, we get our grenade back even quicker. For the third mod, you can choose between two different mods. I like loader mods, since with this build, we do get a lot of ability energy and we are mainly focused on throwing our hammer. I don't find it necessary to either buff our grenade or our class ability energy, so I do like to take a loader mod, which is going to increase the reload speed of our matching element weapons. You can do solar or whatever your power weapon is. Otherwise, I might take focusing strike. This grants class ability energy when you cause damage with a melee. Again, we're throwing our hammer as much as possible, and getting our class ability energy can feed into our other abilities and provide us a little bit more protection. For our chest, I'm choosing 2 to 3 resistance mods. It mainly depends on the content, also matching whatever element is coming in at you or what enemies you might be facing. Again, we want to keep these a little bit diverse, so we are getting the 15% for each mod. If you are facing an encounter that is solely focused on, let's say, arc, you can dive into 2 arc mods to get that 25%. In easy content, I'm choosing a reserves mod for extra ammo and quicker DPS phases, making only 2 resistance mods. For our legs, I like to take a solar weapon surge. I usually pair a solar weapon as my primary and as my heavy weapon, so I can gain that 10% damage and stack that with radiant. Since we don't have another way that we're using our armor charge, this is a good way to just get an overall buff that is continuously helping us with our build. I pair this with recuperation, meaning orbs give us health. Since we don't have as much survivability as you do in the Loreley build, getting that extra little bump in health can be useful. Since if you are being beamed by all the ads, maybe you're doing solo content, it's nice that when you do get that hammer kill and it creates an orb, you're immediately getting a little bit of health back. The third mod is going to be invigoration. This is going to reduce the cooldown of your hammer. This is mainly in case you lose your hammer. You do have a few ways to create mods, i.e. solar weapon kills, so it will be a little bit easier to get back your hammer. Pairing the solar weapon that does have incandescent with creation of orbs, you should be able to get your hammer back fairly quickly. Finally, moving on to our mark. The first mod is going to be outreach. Using your class ability is going to give you melee energy. Again, helping if we do lose our hammer. Our hammer is our crutch, our lifeline, our everything.
You're my everything.
If you lose your hammer, you want to get it back as quick as possible. Pop your barricade, shoot your weapons, do whatever you can. Pairing incandescent that scorches, using our barricade, as well as picking up orbs, getting our hammer back should be a little bit easier now with this build. The second mod is going to be time dilation. This is going to make it so that if you do pick up 3 orbs, instead of having your 30-second armor charge, you now get up to 45 seconds with your weapon surge. And finally, the last mod is going to be proximity ward. This means you get an overshield on finishers. This can be used to save yourself or to be a little bit more aggressive on an enemy that you want to be done with, like a champion. For the artifact in this season isn't really about solar, meaning we don't really have any mods from the seasonal artifact to buff this, though it will be getting better in future seasons that are about solar. This is just going to show how strong this build is, since there isn't anything that is making this build that much crazier. As I said before, I do like to pair this build with a solar primary, mainly one that has incandescent. Incandescent is going to make it so that when you do kill an enemy, it's going to scorch the targets around it, which is going to feed into the rest of this build. Not only is it going to do more damage, but also it's going to give our melee back quicker if we do lose our hammer. A few weapons that I have in mind. The first up is a trace rifle. You can use Acacia's detection. I love this because it comes with reconstruction and incandescent, meaning you never have to reload, and you can use incandescent on all the enemies in front of you. There's 2 SMGs that I have in mind for this. The Callus mini tool. I have unrelenting and incandescent. This is going to give us a little bit more health, and using incandescent as we mentioned before, and the other is going to be the no survivors from the new dungeon. This can roll with demo and incandescent, and if we are running a healing nade or a solar grenade for that matter, demo is going to make it so that every kill is going to give us back 10%. We pair this with incandescent, now you're getting melee and grenade energy back from the same weapon. This build offers such high damage that even in higher level content, we can one-shot most enemies. We can create mass amount of orbs since we do have an infinite hammer, as long as you pick it up.
I lost my hammer.
Each kill will make a sunspot, which not only damages other enemies, but also gives us restoration and quick ability recharge. We can kill with our solar weapons or our abilities to lengthen the restoration and radiance we have, meaning we have stronger abilities, stronger super, stronger weapons, and a constant health regen so that we can survive and do mad damage to anyone and everyone. I've used this build in the past to solo flawless dungeons, and I will pair this build with my other solar survivability build when I take on the new dungeon solo. If you want to know how to never die, go check out that build and let me know in the comments if you want to see me using this build and that one to take on dungeons solo. If you liked this build or learned anything new, remember to like and subscribe to see more of my content. Let me know your thoughts on the build. What would you change or how would you improve it? That's it for me. Peace out.